You're listening to The Bible Guys, a podcast where a couple of friends talk about the Bible in fun and practical ways.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Bible Guys. We have a great episode, and today is Friday.
Every day we say we have a great episode.
And it's true, Jeff.
Every day. I know.
Don't ever condemn me for saying the truth.
No, I know. You're just speaking the truth.
That's right, in love. Today is Friday, though, and normally people expect to hear possibly what made Chris mad.
What made Chris mad this week?
But however,
that's our favorite episode.
Well,
our favorite
you
segment.
So say you.
Yes.
But Desiree decided to switch things up, and so she is asking the question. Excuse me. She's asking the question, what made Jeff happy this week?
It makes me happy that she asked that question. How about that?
Oh, that's so nice.
I don't know.
And by the way, let me just point out once again that I love how people attribute me always being angry, and somehow you're being attributed to always being happy.
I am.
Jeff's such a happy guy.
I am. I'm a happy person.
Dominantly happy.
Very happy person. I would say I'm a contented person.
Contented,
yeah.
Well, I mean,
I don't have highs and lows.
What?
Per se. I
What?
don't.
Who says that?
I don't. I'm
Who
mostly
says
just
I don't
content.
have highs and lows?
I do. I have highs and I have lows, but I don't know that my angry at the world thing is as significant as yours.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah, exactly.
You're welcome for
which then
being
means
angry at the world.
I think on the other side of this, what she's expecting is that I would have these enthusiasms that equal your frustrations with the world, right? That's what I'm saying.
So you have a self-complex of not being so extremely happy as much as I'm extremely angry?
I'm very happy. I'm a very happy person, but I'm generally content.
I'm so happy.
Yeah, I'm so happy. Well, wasn't that on Gru? Wasn't that Gru's the little girl? I'm so happy.
Yes. He's so fluffy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's so fluffy.
Yep.
So
Despicable Me.
Yeah. So this week, it was time for me to take back my truck. So I leased my truck.
Oh, sad.
And so
that's
it was time to.
That's not happy.
It was time to take it. Yeah, it was good. It was happy.
Because Jeff got something.
Yeah. So
Jeff got something new.
So I wanted a specific truck with specific trim. It was more expensive, well within my budget. But, there's the responsible Jeff and then the one that says, hey, it's still within my budget and I'd rather have this one.
Yeah.
Right? Both of those are responsible, but one was. So my wife, she heard, hey, so you can get this other truck that's almost as good.
Right.
For less. Like, yeah, I could. And I said, my brain is telling me that's what I could do. I could do that.
Yeah,
save a couple
and who
dollars.
wouldn't want to save a little bit and do what you can?
But my heart was telling me I really like this other one, and it's within my budget. I can afford it. Right. So I'm not putting my family in danger.
Right.
I'm just choosing. So I wanted this one.
And by the way, any story that requires such justification before you tell us what you did, has got to be good.
So I had already gone to the dealership and had talked with my favorite car guy that we've dealt with forever. And so we were going back and forth, and he said, well, I have this one, the one I wanted. He said, I have the exact same truck, same color, same everything, just lower trim, less money. And I said, well, I don't know what to do. I said, I know what my brain says I should do, but my heart really says the other one. And I said, my wife is going to be excited about the fact that we'll save so much money with the other truck.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, here's what I'll do. I'll just set aside both of these trucks and you guys can come back test drive them. I said, good idea. I'll bring my wife on Friday. So I bring Bonnie back and, the one had running boards, the other one didn't. So she couldn't hardly get up in the truck because they both have big wheels. The one had leather, the other one didn't. The one had, all these features, the other one didn't. So when we get out of the truck, our guy, Carl, goes, so, hey, what'd you think, Bonnie? She goes, well, I don't think there's even a competition. We got to get that other one.
Yeah.
Right? And so I didn't even have to lobby. I didn't have to. I had said, I know what the responsible decision was. It was the less expensive one.
Sure.
The reality is, they have four wheels and a motor. It's going to get me from point A to point B. Right? It's just I like the one better than the other one, and it's within my budget. So I didn't have to do any negotiating with Bonnie. I didn't have to anything, and she was like, "I think we need this other."
Well, the running boards alone. Right?
Well, she can't get in the truck.
Right, yeah.
She couldn't get in it.
Liz has a hard time getting in. Sometimes I have a truck and she has a hard time getting up in it.
Yeah.
Get your butt up in that truck, right?
Yeah.
We're saving money.
So then we had a problem with that dealership's, I'm not going to say the name of the dealership now, with that dealership's shop, on a repair on a different car that we had.
Okay.
And it was a significant issue. So then we took that car to another competitor's dealership. And it turned out it was a $9,000 difference between what they suggested versus what the actual solution was.
Well, I would never, ever go back to that dealership again.
So, well, I like the salesman. I didn't like that, right? So we mention it.
Yeah.
We mentioned it at the thing. Bonnie was so smart. She goes, hey, we're really loyal to you and this brand. My dad worked for General Motors, and so I get the discounts and stuff. But boy, we were really disappointed with that. He goes, what? And so he went, and the manager gave us a significant discount on this vehicle. So it really landed about 50% of the way between what the lower cost one was and what the higher cost one was. It got about half that off on the payment.
Nice.
Yeah, so it worked out great. Yeah, so that's what made me happy is, you know what? There are still customer service people out there who want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Right? So super apologetic about the bad service we got in the service department. Super positive on the other side. And I didn't have to fight with Bonnie at all about it.
So did you get a Ford or a Chevy?
It's a GMC.
GMC. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
I got
awesome.
a GMC Sierra Denali. It's so nice.
Yeah. Oh, Denali's nice. Nice
so
trim
nice.
package.
So nice. Yeah.
You don't have, so my good buddy Dave, one time got a, what do you call it, Denali? Tahoe, I guess, Denali? Anyway,
Yukon? A Yukon Denali?
Yukon Denali,
Yeah.
that's right, Yukon Denali. And they had heated water in the windshield wipers. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
Did yours have that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And the Denalis are like that cool.
Yeah.
Because if your windshield has frost, it'll heat up the water, and then when you turn on the windshield wipers, it actually like melts the frost.
It's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. My tailgate folds down into a step. So you can just step up into the back of your truck. As the step's got a little handle to hang out to. It's goofy. It's the dumbest truck. It's a grocery getter that I need to get out to go hunting in a couple times a year. That's it. I don't really need this truck, but I love it. It's fun.
Well,
but the better so the truck is fun. That's not what made me happy because stuff goes away. What was making me happy really was the great customer service.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes we complain about customer service.
Good people.
Yeah. Sometimes we complain about customer service, but in this situation, you had some good guys that decided to do the right thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which we very much appreciate good customer service.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. So that's what it was.
Thanks, Jeff, for sharing what made you happy.
It made me so happy.
And you know what?
It took a long time to get there, by the way.
I think you can claim that you're happy for the rest of the world because of good customer service.
Good customer service makes everybody happy.
That's right.
Yep. So we have a quandary because a situation happens in David's life 2 times.
Yeah, they're very similar.
Yes. And we skipped the first one, and we were heading towards the second one.
But I whined and said I like the first one.
But now that we're looking at it, this is when we should be reading the second one. We kind of really want to read the first one.
Yes.
And so one is found in 1 Samuel chapter 24.
Yep.
The other is found in 1 Samuel chapter 26. Right. What happens in between is the story of Nabal and Abigail.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So we decided to go back to 1 Samuel chapter 24.
Yep.
We're going to read that story, and then we'll tell you about the story that happens in 26.
Yeah.
Does that feel good to you?
Yeah, to me. Between the two, this is by far my favorite.
And you're going to know why. You're going to know why in a minute. Because the outcome is the same.
Right.
The reasoning is the same. But there's an element to this story that's not in the other one. And Chris just really needs us to read this one.
Because forever I'm still living in junior high. I'm in junior high always.
Yes. Okay. Here we go. 1 Samuel chapter 24 says, after Saul returned from fighting the Philistines, he was told that David had gone into the wilderness of En-Gedi. So Saul chose 3,000 elite troops from all Israel and went to search for David and his men near the rocks of the wild goats. At the place where the road passes some sheepfolds, Saul went into a cave to relieve himself. Hence the reason why we're reading this story.
There's my giggling.
Yeah. So Saul goes into a cave to relieve himself. It means exactly what you think it means, listener. But as it happened, which is a funny phrase too, as it happened.
As it was happening.
that David and his men were hiding further back in that very cave. "Now's your opportunity," David's men whispered to him. "Today the Lord is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power to do as you wish." So David crept forward and cut off a piece of the hem of Saul's robe. But then David's conscience began bothering him because he had cut Saul's robe. "The Lord knows I shouldn't have done that to my lord the king," he said to his men. "The Lord forbid that I should do this to the Lord my king and attack the Lord's anointed one, for the Lord himself has chosen him." So David restrained his men and did not let them kill Saul. After Saul had left the cave and gone on his way, David came out and shouted after him, "My lord the king!" When Saul looked around, David bowed low before him. Then he shouted to Saul, "Why do you listen to the people who say I'm trying to harm you? This very day you can see with your own eyes it isn't true. For the Lord placed you at my mercy back there in the cave. Some of my men told me to kill you, but I spared you. For I said, I will never harm the king. He's the Lord's anointed one. Look, my father, at what I have in my hand. It's a piece of the hem of your robe. I cut it off, but I didn't kill you. This proves that I'm not trying to harm you, and that I've not sinned against you, even though you've been hunting for me to kill me. May the Lord judge between us. Perhaps the Lord will punish you for what you're trying to do to me, but I will never harm you. As that old proverb says, from evil people come evil deeds. So you can be sure I will never harm you. Who is the king of Israel trying to catch anyway? Should he spend his time chasing one who is as worthless as a dead dog or a single flea? May the Lord therefore judge which of us is right and punish the guilty one. He is my advocate, and he will rescue me from your power. And when David had finished speaking, Saul called back, Is that really you, my son David? And then he began to cry. And he said to David, You are a better man than I am, for you have repaid me good for evil. Yes, you've been amazingly kind to me today, for when the Lord put me in a place where you could have killed me, you didn't do it. Who else would let his enemy get away when he had him in his power? May the Lord reward you well for the kindness you have shown me today. And now I realize that you are surely going to be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will flourish under your rule. Now swear to me by the Lord that when that happens, you will not kill my family and destroy my line of descendants. And so David promised this to Saul with an oath. And then Saul went home, but David and his men went back to their stronghold.
Yeah, so there's so much in here.
Yeah.
And the reason why I love it is, the junior high in me loves that piece of it. It's so crazy.
Saul goes into the men's room.
It goes in the men's room. It's so funny.
And David's already there.
Yes.
And he reaches under the stall and cuts his
right.
robe.
But that's not even nearly why this is my favorite. It's my favorite because of this one comment. So David's mighty men, or it doesn't say mighty men, it says David's men whispered and said, Today the Lord is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power to do with as you wish. And what they're doing is they're interpreting this as an act of God, and yet what David is saying is like, no, don't lay at the feet of God, which doesn't deserve to be laid at the feet of God. Right? It's the times in our lives that we sometimes, listen, I told you before the podcast started, as we were talking about which story to talk about, I said, I have actually heard people say, well, I'm married to this, woman, I'm like really unhappy, and I'm telling you, it was an act of God that I hooked up with this other girl, and they're having an affair, and God just wants me to be happy. And I'm telling you, like God brought her into my life. And I'm like, I'm pretty certain that God didn't do that at all. And I'm pretty certain that, you're trying to lay at the feet of God that which God did not do, because God's word's not going to contradict itself. It never does. And so if God says that he doesn't wish for you to be divorced, because we still believe that, it's a traditional belief that is in God's word pretty clearly, right? That he wants us to work on our marriage and not have an affair and be faithful. That's a biblical value. That's pretty clear.
It's in the Ten Commandments. Jesus affirms it.
Right.
Yep.
So it's like, so why would God, bring somebody into your life? And so I think that because it was a miraculous type thing, keep in mind that it could have been that God brought him into this one cave miraculously so that David could have the victory than the way that he did. So, and I say miraculous because think about this. Yeah. If you go to Israel, you realize how many thousands and thousands of caves there are. And so can you imagine, here's Saul's army led by Saul walking through, this ravine or whatever it is. And as they're looking up on each side of the hills, on the mountains, there are probably hundreds and hundreds of caves. I mean, at least dozens.
Have you been to En-Gedi?
That particular spot, no.
Yeah. So En-Gedi is a narrow canyon, right? And there's a spring, there's a waterfall in there, and then there's little caves along the edges all around. They're sandstone caves, so they wash out all the time. Whenever there's a new rain or something, they're gone. It's a fairly narrow spot. When we were there, it was particularly hot. It's not far from the Dead Sea, and it was one of the guys was wearing a watch that had a thing on it. It was 120 degrees, which is insane, right? And that was just the as soon as we got out of that cavern or that canyon, it went down to like 102 or 103, but it registered on this thing.
Good relief.
Well, it felt really great because it was so hot up in there. So the Bible says that he knew that that's where David was in En-Gedi.
So he knew he was in that.
Yeah, it says that Saul was told that David had gone into the wilderness of En-Gedi. And so the wilderness is fairly large, but this one canyon is fairly narrow. And then if you're going into the wilderness of En-Gedi, there's not much water. So you're going to head towards water. And it's this river that's flowing through this one area. And so he goes to the rocks of wild goats. So it didn't need to be a miracle. It could have been a miracle. It didn't need to be a miracle. It certainly was circumstantial. David's hiding in a cave near the only water source. Saul's looking for David in the area of En-Gedi near the only water source. Saul probably had drank a bunch of water out of that water source. Now he needs to go relieve himself.
Yeah, but of all the caves, you could totally misinterpret that as a God did that, right?
Yeah.
Hey, he could have gone into any one of these hundreds of caves, and if you're only talking about just that, En-Gedi area, you're talking about dozens at least.
Yeah, when you're hunting a person, it's not like it's hey, we looked around for an hour and we're going to go back home. They've been doing this for days and days and days, weeks and weeks. The circumstance of how close and tight that was, it's not beyond comprehension that it just was a circumstance and that David's men were blaming it on God.
Yeah, you're trying to say I'm trying to say
it was just a circumstance. It could have been a circumstance. It didn't have to be a miracle. They were saying it was a miracle.
That's what I've been saying all along.
David was taking it just as a pure circumstance.
Did I make it sound like it was a miracle? No.
It was a miracle.
I was saying that like it seemed miraculous because of the odds.
Yeah. Because his men say, hey, here's a quick and easy solution.
Right.
God must have done this for us.
Right.
Because David's a good guy.
What are the odds that we would be hiding in this cave? I mean, think about how confident that Saul, was that he wasn't in that cave. He tells his whole army to wait here while he goes up into the privacy of a cave.
Right.
And so, and by the way, what other circumstances can you even imagine if you begin to sit down and dream of a circumstance?
Oh, sure.
Right. Of Saul being vulnerable. You couldn't even dream this up. Right. Where Saul somehow has 3,000 men and they're all waiting outside.
Right.
And Saul's by himself. And by the way, let's just say this out loud. In one of the most vulnerable positions.
Yes, he's very, very delicate situation.
Yeah, right. He can't even stand up and run, right? I mean, his pants around his ankles. And so, I mean, all of those things. So it's literally like a dream come true, which is why I would say, you can't dream of it. And so they're probably saying, God must have done this. And so for me, the lesson is that let's be careful not to lay at the feet of God that which God is not in charge of or doing, right? So yeah, this was a circumstance that seems like it was against all odds. Right. But in my mind, if God did orchestrate that circumstantially, it was probably because he wanted David to get the victory of not, taking Saul's life. And by the way, let's talk about David's wisdom.
Humility.
Yeah. It was very wise of him, because think about it. He could have come out of the cave and said, "Oh, king, my king." And all of a sudden Saul said, "Seize him." And then all of a sudden 600 men are fighting 3,000 men and have a chance to lose. Right? So that was a risk. But the wisdom of politically, David gaining the loyalty of the 3,000 men. Yeah. Because those 3,000 men are like, what kind of man is doing this, right? They already probably have respect for David. Right. They already revere him as a warrior, right? And they're being made to listen to Saul's orders. David comes out and says, do you realize what could have happened? And let me show you that I'm not trying to harm you. And so in front of his 3,000 men, Saul almost had no choice. Yeah. Remember seeing Gladiator? Remember the movie Gladiator?
Yes.
Remember when Caesar feared the people?
Oh, right.
And he could have said, kill the gladiator,
Right.
but he didn't out of fear of the people.
Yep.
Because the politics were, I can't do this publicly. And I think that's what was happening here.
Right.
I think that like David had a lot of wisdom here.
So then in 1 Samuel 26, it's a similar story. Saul has another 3,000 men. He's out looking for David again. So he's up and down, up and down, up and down. And David sends out some spies, and the spies come back and say, hey, we found where the camp is. So David turns around to Abishai and I forgot the other one, Ahimelech, and he goes, hey, you guys want to sneak down in the camp with me?
Right.
And so they do. They sneak down in the camp to see what's going on. And Abishai specifically. And so they go right into Saul's camp. They find him asleep. There's a spear stuck in the ground and a water bottle right next to him. And Abishai goes, God has surely handed your enemy over to you this time. Right?
Right.
And he goes, let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't need to strike twice. That's Abishai.
Wow.
How tough is that, right?
Yeah.
And David goes, no, don't kill him, because nobody can remain innocent after attacking the Lord's anointed one. And so instead they steal the spear and the water jug. Then they go up on the side of the hill, and then they call out to Saul and say, hey, I didn't kill you again.
Wow.
Right? So this is the second time he's able to establish to all of Saul's warriors, I'm not going to kill this guy.
Right.
Right? And there's something to be said about that. Not touching the Lord's anointed. God blesses that, and Saul acknowledges that as well. That in this situation, so again, if Saul had wrestled with David and is attacking David, and David killed Saul, that would have been justified. It would have been self-defense. He would have been protecting himself. But when David had the opportunity to kill Saul, not having been assaulted, in that moment, it would have been murder. It would have been the wrong thing, and he would have been executing the one that God had chosen to be king. And so David said, hey, God chose him to be king. God will take him out, but it's not going to be at my hand.
Yeah.
And he says in that passage in chapter 26, either God will kill him or he'll die of old age. But either way, I will not raise my hand against God's anointed.
Yeah.
That's what he says in chapter 26.
So David here is really demonstrating, number one, patience for God's plan.
Yeah.
Because David already knows that God told through the prophet Samuel and said that, hey, David, you're going to be king one day.
Right.
So he could have easily interpreted both of these circumstances as, hey, if I kill him, I'll be the king.
Yeah.
Maybe this is how God's going to do it.
Right.
So, but David decides to wait patiently and says, hey, I don't want it to be my hand. I want it to be God's hand. I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to push it through.
Right.
I'm not going to be the instrumentation. I'm going to rely on God. Let it be God's thing, which there's something to be said about that. In every decision that we make, let it not be us forcing it through just because we think it's God's will. Let's sit back and make sure that this is God's doing, not ours.
Yeah, we had a conversation about this a few weeks ago about, I don't like to pay attention to podcasts and shows and stuff that talk bad about churches and pastors and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And this is one of those reasons for me personally is far be it from me to say that God didn't call them into ministry, that God didn't choose them. The fact that they're misbehaving is none of my business anyways, right? And God will bring judgment on them, and I don't have to be a part of that. I'm not going to indulge in that. And that's a little bit of that. I feel like in my own life, my wife and I had a situation in ministry where we got into a thing where we realized, hey, this is a really weird fit for us. And most of the decisions, the pastor I was working for at the time, I just disagreed with. I'm not talking theologically or morally, just strategically. He didn't have instincts that was going to, what he was dreaming and what he was actually deciding to do were two totally different things. And I was always conflicted with that. I was frustrated. But there was never a time in 5 years that my wife and I ever told anybody else that we disagreed with his decision making. We always only ever reinforced his decisions. We only ever tried to help him achieve his goals. We never, even though there were times when it hurt us, so where we wound up taking punishment because of his choices and his decisions. But I had promised I would stay with him for 5 years. We did. We stayed 5 years and 2 months. And I just decided there was never going to be a day when nobody on his board, nobody in his church would ever hear me disagree with him. There were a couple of little secondary theological things that I disagreed with. And even those I reinforced. I'd say, hey, this is what we believe as a church. This is what our pastor believes. This is what I'm going to. reinforce. And I really believe that some of the blessing that I've received in my ministry since has been because we chose not to. That wasn't my church. It wasn't my place, right? I was supposed to be there serving him. And so I wasn't the one that was chosen to lead that church. He was. And so I was just supposed to support him. And I believe that God then, in the same way that Saul recognized David, you're going to do great things. Well, God's going to do something special with you if that's the kind of person you're going to be. And that was always the inspiration for me in not disagreeing with him privately or publicly, was because, hey, it's none of my business. God picked him to do that, and someday God will give me a thing. And so now at Heritage Church, I'm responsible for my dumb decisions,
Right, right.
And I think God blesses you when you choose to go, hey, I don't have to get involved with all the negative side of somebody that God chose to lead that thing, whether they're misbehaving or not. It's none of my business, and I'm going to go on and do the right thing anyways. There's something to that.
That's great.
I don't think that's carte blanche to go off and sin.
Right.
But I do think that God will reward you and bless you for choosing not to get caught up in it.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah. Well, hey, that's our time. So what a great set of stories. And hopefully we'll pick back up with you next time on the Bible Guys.